Yo, what's up everybody? Listen, let's talk about diagnostics today. So today's lecture is about diagnostics and really like, hey man, I want to understand what's going on under the hood. I want to peek under the hood and I want to understand, and I maybe don't want to do a checkup, or maybe you are still on the checkup mindset. Wherever you may be in your walk of life where you're trying to understand how to take, a better understanding of, I don't like saying health even, because it's much more than health, but health is everything at the same time. There's so many terms to use here. I talk about this all day, every day. It's all I've done for the last few years, and I still sometimes struggle with the right word to say. But when you want to understand just your vitality, that word that just came to mind, just like your production, how you're living life, you need data behind that, right? Because look, when you look at your company, if you're an entrepreneur, or when you're looking at your bank account or whatever it is, you want data, you want projections, you want budgets, right? And you want conglomerates of data and all different kinds of optic to look inside the performance of whatever vehicle that may be it a bank account, be it a car, be it a company, and so on and so forth. But when looking at the most intrinsic machine on planet Earth, which is we settle for a checkup. We only look at things that are very small. We look at things like, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. Come back next year, pat on the butt, and you're doing fine. But then all of a sudden next year, Mr. Smith comes back and is like, hey man, Mr. Smith, you're not doing so good this year. Really? Why is that? Well, Mr. Smith, I hate to tell you, but looks like you have cancer. No way, I'll be damned. I've been coming to you every year. You're doing a checkup and said everything's okay. Yeah, well, this year it's not. Oh, shoot. Guys, do you know how long it takes to form certain cancers? Do you know how long it takes to form certain heart attacks, for example? Now with the advent of understanding a little bit more in depth what really causes heart disease and plaque and so forth, and plaque is the number one killer in the U.S., right? Atherosclerotic disease, right? Giving it that big mouthful name, atherosclerotic disease. Number one killer in the U.S. Guys, it takes years and years and years to form. But then you go to your doc, oh, and he's looking at your cholesterol, this all seems okay. So, for example, when you look at cholesterol, why are you so freaking scared about those cholesterol numbers? Why do doctors say, oh, your cholesterol's high? I like to ask, which cholesterol? Because all your cells they need cholesterol, right? All your cells are producing cholesterol, all of them. Your brain loves cholesterol, for example. So, question is there, okay, what's wrong with cholesterol? Okay, but I'm not going to, this is not a lecture on cholesterol. Go listen to our lecture on cholesterol. But for example, one thing I will mention. So for example, if you have high LDL little a, and if you have high ApoB, apolipoprotein B, which you're not, more than likely, your checkup is not addressing that. It's definitely not addressing something in that in depth, right? If you have high ApoB and high LDL little a, it is a recipe for disaster. And you're starting to form atherosclerotic disease in most namely coronaries, right? The big topic of ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So, and you're more than likely starting to form plaque there. And you can check it in a preventative way, right? So by getting further diagnostics, and it's a freaking little blood exam that doesn't cost much for you to do. And then all of a sudden, if you see that you have high LDL little a or high ApoB, and I have really high ApoB genetically, I have a tendency for having high ApoB, and we're going to talk about genetic stuff in a little bit, because like I have some stuff in my genes. I was like, ugh. The first time I saw that, I was like, Jesus. And I've gone to traditional cardiologists and try to put me on a bazillion medications, meds that we'll get to that in a second. But point is, you understanding you have something, for example, like a high LDL little a and ApoB, you're like, holy smokes, well, what should I do next? Well, maybe you should go get a calcium score, which there's a picture here now on the screen so you guys can see the difference in these hearts, right? You'll see that one heart has like no little white dots. If that doesn't have any white dots, that's good. There's no calcium there. There's no plaque. But if it has a little bit of a plaque there, you're going to see a little bit of white in there. That's not good. That's plaque inside the heart. Now, if you go see the next image, that heart has more plaque, and then so on and so forth. And then when there's a lot of white in that heart, no bueno, that's a problem. That's a myocardial infarction waiting to happen, meaning you're going to clog up those arteries, and that person's eventually going to have a heart attack. Now, if you're doing your yearly checkup, if you're doing it a little bit more in depth, you can catch these things. Okay? in a preventative fashion. But if you're not doing a proper diagnostic study, you're not going to catch these things. So then when you go back to your doctor that says, hey, Mr. Smith, yeah, it's, when it may be the cancer case that I was pointing to in a few minutes ago, or say you go see that doctor, it's like, hey, I had a heart attack. How come you didn't see this? Well, these guys, there's sometimes these critters, they sneak up on you just like out of nowhere. No, you can see these things coming for the most part, right? So what I definitely want to give you guys a little bit of a framework today is perhaps how to have this discussion with your clinician or whoever you see. You need data. You need really good data, guys. You can't just, do a checkup and hope that it works. The problem is, oh man, I want to go to somebody and they guide me through the whole thing. But guys, you need to understand this a little bit. And if you're watching this, you're one of those people that you want information, and I commend you for that. And so let's get into it. So you have different kinds of blood exams, right? But you want in-depth blood exams. You want to understand your organ function, right? So inside your blood exams, you're going to have basic metabolic panel, and we'll put a picture here on the screen so you guys can see. You have your kidney function test, your liver function test, your endocrine panel, which is your hormone panel, which a lot of docs are already not pulling that stuff, because if there's no reason and it's not covered by insurance, you have to justify to the insurance to say, hey, I'm pulling this from so-and-so because of XYZ reasons, because I suspect there's a problem here. And that's the part where I don't agree too much. When I went to medical school, I remember hearing this lecture from this guy that he does lectures for the board. So Dr. Golgin. I don't know if doctors out there listening to this might remember this guy. And in the lectures, he's talking about like, hey, you shouldn't sit here and he had a term for this, I think, spitball or something, start ordering exams, because that shows you don't know what you're doing. So you should be so good that you can diagnose with, and then just order the relevant labs. No. I remember listening to that. I'm like, I'm sure I'd love your ego kind of gets hurt a little bit because you're like, well, yeah, no, I am going to be that good that I'll order the exact labs. Instead of ordering 500 labs, I'll order those two because I'm suspecting those two things. No, they foster that mindset in us because then that saves money. And then you don't have to, you have to justify why you're ordering those labs. Beyond the endocrine report that I'm talking to you guys about, then there's CBC with differential, which there's a lot of clues, and that's what your traditional doctor will order that. But I beg to differ that we need to go a lot deeper, right? And then, there's other things like the cholesterol panel that I mentioned before. There's the diabetic indices or your sugar markers, which are your HbA1c, etc. But that's not even scratching the surface. So for example, something that I think is very, very important, let's break this up into families. You have your organ function, which we just spoke about a few of these things, but then you have your lifestyle blood exams, and this is a name I'm giving to you guys, so just we can categorize this. There's no specific name, and I'll tell you what I kind of chunk on in these lifestyle exams. And then DNA studies, that's one that more people are talking about. And then ultimately your epigenetic information, which I think that's phenomenal. Now, when you put all that together, epigenetic information, genetic information, lifestyle studies, organ function, so on and so forth, then now we're talking, right? And then if you really want to get into it, and something I really suggest is you bring in imaging, where you bring in full body MRIs, calcium scores, ultrasonography to your major arteries that have, tend to have plaque, right? Because if plaque is the number one killer, well, then maybe we should be proactive and seeing if our families are having these issues. Like my parents, I've surveyed them head to toe to understand if they have any issues with plaque and so on and so forth. So going back, another important study on cholesterol would be lipoprotein fractionation, which is the breakdown of your cholesterol particles, right? It's really important to understand the different sizes and quantity of your cholesterol particles, then understanding different tests like your ApoE, ApoA, ApoB, right, which influence heavily your cholesterol as well. And then the LDL-a that I mentioned in the beginning, that's also inside lipoprotein fractionation, right? And for those of you guys that this is all new, maybe you want to take a pause and write these things down. Just here, if you get everything that I've mentioned to you now at this point in the lecture, you're already doing yourself a great, great favor because you're going to be ahead of the curve significantly. And obviously, work with somebody that can interpret those results accordingly and then adjust your lifestyle to that, right? Now, once you have this information, organ function studies and then like your endocrine report. Also, don't settle for a small endocrine report. Just men, a big one. Oh, what's your testosterone? Who cares what's your testosterone? What's your free testosterone? What's your bioavailable testosterone? Yes, what's your total testosterone? But also, what's your SHBG, which is the molecule that's working to decrease your free testosterone? What's your estradiol? What's your estrogens, for example? Not only estradiol, but estrone, estradiol, estriol for both men and women, progesterone for men, prolactin, DHEA, cortisol. All these things count. All these things are very, very important. And I know this is a mouthful today, but and like I said, if you guys are new to this, go ahead and write to us. Write to our company, write to Biohax, and we'll fully sit down with you guys and explain this stuff to you in detail, in like massive detail. You guys will sit down on Zoom wherever you are in the world, and we'll explain like what this stuff should look like. Okay, because it is kind of hard for me to explain this and not turn this into a very beefy lecture. But now let's get into a little bit into DNA. So when understanding, for example, how we're going to provide supplementation for somebody, and for those of you guys that have heard our other lectures, we're really big on supplementation that is custom made in pharmacies for the patient. Nothing, go to your traditional supermarkets or stores and get the supplements, because a lot of these supplements honestly are disguised as other things, right? And you can see supplements like Centrum, for example, has titanium dioxide inside of it, etc. Has a bunch of nefarious molecules inside of it that you don't want to put in your body, right? Titanium dioxide for Skittles just got, I believe, sued for having titanium dioxide inside. So you got to be careful with a lot of these supplements. So what we do, we custom make a lot of these supplements, and a lot of it in injectable form. I know it's not for everybody, but when you start to feel the benefits, it's great. Now, for you to provide proper supplementation and even lifestyle modification for somebody, it's important to understand their DNA. It's important to understand the makeup of their DNA, okay? And see, for example, I'll give you an example, AMY gene. Somebody might have overexpression or underexpression of the AMY gene. Dr. D, what the heck's the AMY gene? Okay, AMY gene is a gene that, depending on the expression that you have on it or of it, will influence your ability to put yourself in diabetes. Okay, so a person that has an issue with that gene, maybe then they would benefit more from supplements that provide a little bit of hypoglycemic effects, such as berberine, alpha lipoic acid, chromium, so on and so forth, right? And there's other amazing peptides that also help to lower that effect, like IGF-1, for example, MOTS-c, SS31, and so on and so forth. There's really, really good peptides for that, most namely mitochondrial peptides. But when you look at the DNA report, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then you look at the micronutrient report, which that's coming from that other group of blood exams, which is a micronutrient report. You guys know macronutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats, but a micronutrient report is telling me the makeup of your amino acids, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. It's wonderful, because what is your level of glutathione? What is your level of serine? What is your level of asparagine? What is your level of ubiquinol? And so on and so forth. Vitamin D3, K2, manganese, selenium, and the list goes on, right? What are your levels of these things? And think about it, guys. This is very important. Your biochemistry runs on these vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Okay. Now, and then if I have your DNA report that I understand the genes that you might not be so, let's say, it might not have such a favorable makeup, and pathology is just waiting to happen, or for example, a guy like me, right, that I told you guys I don't have too much of a favorable genetic cardiovascular profile. What the heck am I going to do? I can do some CRISPR on it, right? So, but that's a lecture for another day. If you guys don't know what CRISPR is, go ahead, Google it. There's a big talk around that stuff. A lot of documentaries on it and so forth. A really good documentary on Netflix called Unnatural Selection. Go ahead and watch it. It's about altering your genes, but definitely not going there. But when I understand my genes and I understand the micronutrient report, I can better build a supplementation program for me, right? Especially something that we have a lot now in our developed worlds or countries is metabolic syndrome, which is basically people are becoming obese, having issues with their triglycerides and bad cholesterols, having issues with sugars and so forth, and effectively having metabolic syndrome. These proper supplementation there's a tremendous amount of research. If you guys go to Google Scholar, not Google, but Google Scholar, and put supplementation, metabolic syndrome, etc., you'll see there's a lot of articles in regards to what you can be taking to help in a scenario where the person is metabolically dysregulated. So, going back, now you see the difference. I have your organs report. Now I have your DNA report. Now I have your micronutrient report. This thing's starting to look interesting. Now I'm starting to actually build this human and tweak this human in a way that this human is going to feel the difference. Because lots of times you're taking these darn supplements, you're not feeling the difference. You're spending money, 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 money. You're not feeling the difference. And then you don't even freaking know what it's doing to you. If it's good, if it's bad, right? And we want objectively data. We want to repeat all these studies that we're doing. But let's keep going deeper. Other studies that, for example, are very, very important are chemical toxicity studies, right? There's so many chemicals in our environment, and I feel like lately I've done a lot of lectures on chemicals, talking about all the way from excitotoxins to toxic halides to the toxic chemicals in our environment, in beauty products, cleaning products. So you guys can definitely go listen to those lectures. A lot of good information for you guys over there. But when understanding and actually looking at a blood exam, and I particularly really like a laboratory called Cyrex, CYREX.com. Really great guys there. I have a lecture also with Dr. Engelman. He's the medical director there. You guys can check it out too. It's on YouTube. It's on our podcast stuff as well. When you start to look at the chemical toxicity that some people have, it's like, what the heck, man? This person has, their immune system is attacking certain chemicals inside of them that are causing certain defects. And you'd be surprised. You can check for things like BPA, tetrachloroethylene, heavy metals, list goes on, a bunch of stuff that you guys can really go down the list and see, wow, these things are actually wreaking havoc inside my body, waking up my immune system, where you see that your immunoglobulins, which we call them short for IgG or IgM, or IgA, etc. They're attacking. There's antibodies attacking these particular chemicals inside your body. That's huge. That's something that should not be disregarded. If you see that that's inside your body, it's like, wait, hold on, I actually need to change my lifestyle. That's why I call these lifestyle blood exams or lifestyle diagnostics, to see what the heck is affecting you in that way. You see what I'm saying? Is it your cleaning products? Is it the perfumes you're putting on? Is it the containers you're putting your foods in? And so on and so forth, right? Moving forward, you should look at food studies. So food additives, right? Continuing kind of on the chemicals and transitioning into foods, we can look at a lot of things that are inside the foods and thickening agents like locust bean gum, gum guar, gum tragacanth, all these different things that cause, for example, leaky gut, which is also called intestinal permeability disorder. So when we look at these gum and thickening agents, we can actually see that they're attacking your intestinal wall and causing effectively the leaky gut, and which that for sure is a great gateway to dysregulate your immune system. It's nuts, guys. It's nuts. It's not something that we should be allowing. And these things are all very new to us. These things have all been pretty much introduced into our system, I'd say, in the last 50 years. Right? Because we've had two agricultural revolutions. The first one in 1970 with the pesticides, and now with the GMOs, and we're about to have another one with the 3D print food and all, and so on and so forth, which I particularly disagree heavily with that, right? Now, continue looking at, you're looking at the intestinal permeability, but also then understanding which foods your body's reacting to. So, like I said, we can look at even certain food additives, preservatives, or even sweeteners. There's tests that we can use to understand if you're having an issue with xylitol, monk fruit, aspartame, sucralose. We can actually see if your body's having a specific issue with these foods or these artificial sweeteners, and take them out. So we show it to you, hey, here, let's take this stuff out because your body's not getting along with this. Guys, the value added to your life knowing that you're taking these chemicals that your body all of a sudden is not getting along with, and a lot of these are in the excitotoxin families, just waiting to cause cancer. They're already making you mad, sad, irritable, life's not good, and then you're waiting to cause yourself a cancer, waiting to cause yourself, I'm not going to say mental disease, but put yourself in a situation where you're going to end up with possibly even going to a psychiatrist, etc., taking medications because of an excess chemical or chemical makeup inside your body that's really hurting you. And the huge one, for example, is MSG, monosodium glutamate, right? And I know you guys now are going to go into the kitchen cabinets and perhaps look at all the stuff, all the crap that has MSG. There's more than 50 names for MSG, okay? So even I have a hard time memorizing all these names. But I will tell you something, when you see something on a box that says natural flavors, stay away, okay? Stay away. Very unregulated term that's a big pitfall for just putting a lot of bad chemicals inside your body. So there's blood exams that we can actually test these things. So that's huge. That's huge for us to understand that. Not only is it important to understand the food side of things, but moving on, it's important to understand how you react to gluten and gluten polyreactivity. I know a bunch of people, they're like, oh, I'm gluten-free. I'm gluten-free, and it's new life. But I took this initiative. I'm not eating gluten. I'm living my new life, but I still feel the same way. Well, lots of times they're polyreacting. So they're eating one thing, right? You're eating an egg, but your body's reacting to the egg as if it was gluten, because over time, eating the gluten, the day comes that your body now starts to get confused. Your immune system starts to get confused, and now looks at the egg and it says, egg. And the egg's like, yes. And your body's like, you're gluten. And the egg's like, what, he's crazy? I'm not gluten. I'm an egg. He's like, gluten, I'm gonna kick your butt. He's like, put them up. And the egg's like, relax, I'm not gluten. Eventually starts attacking the gluten, the quinoa, the brown rice, the hemp seeds, the whatever. It's a long list of stuff. Buckwheat, all these things that the body can polyreact to. Instant coffee, you name it. Oh, and by the way, a lot of you instant coffee drinkers, etc. Lots of times, have you ever noticed you drink coffee and you're more tired as if you had not drank the coffee? Well, because it polyreacts. And not to name a lot of the fungi, etc., that could be associated to those coffee beans itself. So polyreactivity is an important test to also understand, especially for a lot of people with gut issues, which we see more and more and more, given that our food is more and more engineered, more and more filled with chemicals. We're going to start seeing a huge rise in that, huge darn rise in that industry, okay? Now moving forward, it's very important to understand the bugs inside your gut. So understand, you guys take probiotics. Which probiotic is right for you, right? In a pre or pro, whatever. What are you guys taking? So how about the bug makeup inside your gut? So there's a beautiful topic or area of science growing called psychobiotics. I love this conversation. I think it's a very, very like techie and high level medical conversation that's developing. So psychobiotics, so your psyche connected to your biome. Because look, your neurotransmitter, for example, serotonin, 90% of that darn neurotransmitter, 90% is made in your belly. What's the health of your belly? Are you taking care of your belly? Are you taking care of the garden that your belly is? Because if you're not, you're asking for trouble. So your stomach, your belly, it's so important. It's your second brain, as many people say. And many doctors are saying that all autoimmune starts at the gut level, which I don't know if I really disagree with that. I joke around with our staff, we have a little joke. It's like, you say skin, I say gut. You say skin, I say gut. Because skin is super connected with your gut and your gut health, right? And lots of times people are developing rashes and so on and so forth, and their gut isn't in proper shape. You see what I'm saying? So very important to do intestinal permeability tests, microflora tests to understand the bugs, the commensal bugs, etc., inside your gut. Very important to do intestinal permeability screens, polyreactivity screens, gluten, not allergy, but sensitivity, guys. Allergy is a different story. Very, very important to understand your gut health. I'm going to keep moving on. Really important then to do pathogen studies. So all the way things like fungus, bacteria, viruses, parasites that could just be lodged in your system for years and years and years and years, right? And I'll give you guys an example. We live in Miami. In Miami, it's very common for us to see Stachybotrys carotarum. Remember him from high school? Stack of Boches? Mr. You don't remember him from prom? So it's black mold. You know, black mold. So if you guys Google Stachybotrys carotarum, you'll see black mold is going to come up on the images. Ew, right? And that's what a lot of the clients will say. It's like, so, Miss Susan, see this big name here? Stachybotrys carotarum? Yeah, that's black mold. Why is it red? Well, because your body's reacting to it. It's inside of you, causing, wreaking havoc. Ew, we hear that all the time, right? Or penicillium, also found in homes, etc. These are all molds or yeasts that are found in our environment, in our homes, but that can also really be hurting us, and they're cancer causing. You see, guys, cancers, we now know that a lot of these cancers are induced by just things around us, our lifestyle, things we're putting inside our bodies. So, you know, in 10 cancers, one is really full-blown 100% genetic, and many others are woken up due to the things we're putting inside of it, being in a bug, being in a chemical, being foods, and so on and so forth. About 70% of cancers come from foods. That's crazy. But it's not the food itself. It's the chemicals inside the foods. And if you don't understand what your weaknesses and strengths are, how are you expecting to live a life of abundance? How are you expecting to live a long-lasting life? How are you expecting to have an increased health span and lifespan? You're not. You're digging yourself into a grave, literally, literally, okay? And a lot of times people say, oh, it's so expensive to invest in my health, to do these kinds of things. What do you know what the consequences are? Death. You not taking care of yourself is accelerating your death. There's, come on. I mean, if that doesn't sink in somebody's head, I don't know, you know? So understanding a proper pathogen study is super important. For example, some people walk around bloated all day. And I know I got people at home raising their hands. And sometimes it's the foods that you're eating and your body can't react we can't digest well these foods. And for some of you guys, I'll tell you, just get off the gluten. Sometimes it does a big thing. Get off gluten and dairy, and a lot of you guys will have a problem fixed. But again, we don't like to guess here. But lots of times, there's a bug called Candida albicans. It's a yeast. So it's like mold, right? The difference between yeast and mold is pretty much temperature, right? Mold is warm, yeast is colder. So just so you guys know. So understand that, for example, if the person has Candida in their belly's going to be pretty darn swollen. There's even a type of diet called the FODMAP diet, FODMAP, to try to get rid of it. And that stuff loves sugar. That bug loves sugar, right? If that's inside your belly, that's a problem. Women have a lot of issues with that and their genitourinary side. There's women that have issues with vaginal candidiasis, and that bug is tough to get rid of. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But just giving you guys small examples. I mean, there's a ton of different bugs that could really be causing issues, you know. And I'll give you guys a name of a bug that you guys will be like, oh yeah, I know about that one. We all tend to know somebody that's had an issue with that. For example, Borrelia burgdorferi. And you're like, who the heck is that? Lyme's disease, for example. Right, which is found on a tick called the Ixodes tick. Ixodes sounds kind of like X, and which is the same bug for babesia and ehrlichiosis, etc. So again, then it starts to get kind of boring. I'm going to start rattling off your big names, but it's important to understand if your body has any kind of reaction to those bugs. Moving on, another side that I love to collect data on is neurotransmitter imbalances. So one thing that I find interesting is in psychiatry, there is no specific measure to say, okay, anxiety is this. You guys will hear me say this in some of our other lectures where anxiety is X amount of serotonin and X amount of this and X amount of that. No, there's no specific measure to that. There's no math behind that. Anxiety is basically clinical diagnosis. Depression is a clinical diagnosis, which any doctor listening to this will remember SIGI CAPS, right? We learned that in medical school, which is the mnemonic to diagnose depression, which SIGI CAPS, it's an acronym, stands for suicidal ideation, which obviously that is a huge sign of depression, needs to be taken care of immediately. But there is, actually, I just going on a tangent here, even people that have suicidal ideation, there are biochemical imbalances, 5-HIAA, increased levels in the cerebral spinal fluid. So there are things that we can identify in behavior and chemistry, but we don't seem to connect that in psychiatry. Anyways, I didn't plan to go on that tangent, but I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about. So going back to the acronym SIGI CAPS, so suicidal ideation, loss of interest, guilt, concentration, appetite issues, psychomotor retardation, which just means pretty much laziness, and then sleep disturbance. So taking out suicidal ideation, which that is indeed very grave and needs to be dealt with immediately by proper professionals. But the other ones, if you've had any five of the last symptoms in the last 2 weeks, yeah, that's the qualification that qualifies a person for depression and then qualifies them to be put on medications. But depending on whatever period of my life that you might have caught me on, I might have been feeling a little lazy. I might have had appetite issues. I might have had sleep issues. I might have definitely have concentration issues. Still, that one's always present. Still don't know how I got through med school, but I'm very hyperactive. I like to ask, okay, what is this person's level of neurotransmitter, of XYZ neurotransmitter? And I think it's very important to understand that level of chemical makeup in your brain. Right? Because it all boils down to data, biochemical data, and math and certain levels. So once we see that we use another lab for that called Sinesco Labs. I really like them as well. So once we see that information, we look to map it out. Okay, this person's maybe missing a little bit of serotonin, and that's why they're having these XYZ symptoms, or their dopamine levels are a little lower, or norepinephrine, epinephrine, PEA, whatever it may be, glutamate levels, GABA. GABA's a big one. And a lot of people don't know about GABA, but when you take that alcoholic drink at happy hour, it's turning on GABA. Stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid, right? Or person that takes the Valium, turning on GABA, benzodiazepines and so forth. Or when you take an Ambien, which is doing that, which is also called Zolpidem, and it's a GABA-1Z agonist, right? So on and so forth. So what is the person's level of GABA, for example? Right? So very important to understand neurotransmitter makeup. And then, obviously, if you have the DNA always backing you up, remember, you have that person's DNA, and you know if that person has a heightened or decreased ability to produce serotonin, GABA, and whatever it may be in question, right? And then, ultimately, when you're doing this right, it's important to understand, the whole thing is we want increased health span. The idea is to live longer a longer and happier life, etc. Right? But to live longer, that's what we want: health span and lifespan. So if we want lifespan, well, you need to understand your rate of aging. You need to look at your epigenome. You need to understand epigenetics, right? Which is kind of measuring the amount of damage is expressed on those genes. And you don't have to express those genes. Remember that. You don't have to express those genes. So just because you have a gene doesn't mean you need to express it. Right? And I was telling you guys before, I would tell you later, like on my cardiovascular profile, I have a gene called the MYBPC3 gene. It's not a good gene, right? It's a gene that can cause me to have bigger heart, etc. I've spoken to doctors about this, and they're like, oh, let's put you on, and I got prescribed a bunch of medications. I said, no. I mean, it's not their fault, because they're still on pre-genomic medicine, right? I went to school on pre-genomic medicine. Guys, we have the epigenome now. We've calculated the epigenome. We understand the epigenome. Okay, we understand that you can control to express or not certain genes. You can put things inside your body that will benefit the good genes and shut off the bad genes, and you can put things inside your body that will shut off your good genes and promote those bad genes to wake up. So it's my choice on how I'm going to live my life, that I'm either going to wake up these genes or not. You having the DNA and understanding that information, but understanding your epigenome and your rate of aging and how you're expressing these genes are very important. So if you keep track of that, if every 6 months you're checking out your epigenome, and to tell you the truth, if you took nothing of this, check your epigenetic age. Just do that. Or your rate of aging, because a lot of these clocks, these epigenetic clocks, the way you test for their quality, it's a measure called the ICC. So some of these clocks have failed, like the first newer generation clocks, like the first generation clocks, the Horvath clock. They failed, for example, in the calorie restriction trial. And the calorie restriction trial, we know that a way to increase someone's longevity, increase their lifespan, is actually restricting calories. We know that for a fact. Everybody agrees upon that across the board. Obviously, regenerative medicine will tell you there's other ways to perhaps that we're postulating that can increase somebody's lifespan, like stem cells and peptide therapy and biohacking techniques like hyperbaric and hormesis and changing temperatures, right? A drastic change in temperatures in your body, which I validate a lot of that stuff, and I believe in that for me personally. But calorie restriction, like I was saying, is agreed across the board. The first generation epigenetic clocks failed with the calorie restriction trial. It actually did not work properly. Second generation clocks as well. The ICC, remember, this is the quality of that clock was lower. Now we have the third, and now moving on to the fourth generation clocks. These are way more predictive, and they'll tell you your rate of aging. So like last year I was aging at 85%. This year I'm aging at 75%. The record in the US is at 60%. So working to get there. But I am in the top 10th percentile already. But there are some things I'm gonna have to do to go a little bit more hardcore, right? And tweak my supplementation is pretty darn on point, but I can perhaps give myself always a little bit more than an hour to hour and a half of sleep. I'm not a big fan of sleeping. I know a lot of people are like, what? I'm like, I want to be awake and live life and do things, you know. So I'm like, I gotta go to sleep, fine. And it's like, you know, it's not my thing. I decrease my levels of stress and so on and so forth to get myself there, right? You know, and these all things count, like don't microwave your food and so on and so forth. So understanding your epigenome and understanding your rate of aging will show you the impact of everything put together on your health. And then ultimately, right, doing imaging, I personally think is very important. I invest in this every year, every 2 years. I do not own an imaging facility, so just like everybody else, I gotta go put money on the table and tell my family, hey, let's all go do full body scans. Let's see what's under what's cooking under the oven or in the oven, right? Because it's important that, hey, if all of a sudden there's some kind of mass or something in the body that we need to understand, hey, what is this? It's important we do. And even for those of you that really, you know, have cancer phobia, a lot of people, I mean, nobody wants to have cancer, but I know many people, sometimes you're so scared. And the problem is, how the heck do you diagnose this thing? It's definitely not that darn checkup that's going to help you to prevent cancer for the most part, right? Doing a full body scans, there's many companies across the US that do that. It's very, very interesting. And there's a company I like called Grail.com, GRAIL.com. They do blood tests. I don't know if we can fully say yet diagnosed because it's not mainstream, but it will pick up cancer signals, and the lab itself, their overall their specificity, as we say in medicine, like meaning how something can actually really point out an issue, is 99.5%. Sensitivity is a little low. It's in the high 60s, if I'm not mistaken, overall on the lab. So meaning sensitivity, it's how sensitive it is to something. So it might not catch it, might not be sensitive to all kinds of cancers. I believe they're looking at around 50 types of cancers, of which 40 lacked screening before. So it's way better than anything by far that we've ever had. So, but still, sensitivity is low, but when it does fire, it's firing for real. It's 99.5% specific, right? So something really interesting to do. And if you guys do that, you know, just a word of caution, if you do have positive results, make sure you work with proper doctors and oncologists, et cetera, that can help you at that point. But now when you put this whole constellation that I've been talking about here for I don't know how long, when you put all these things together, now you have data. Now you have diagnostics. This is how you get to work. Oh, and you do some ultrasounds too. Check out your carotids. Check out especially if you were a smoker, male, over the age of 65. You know, check out your aorta. And this is actually the United States Preventative Task Force suggests, actually, even in traditional medicine. And this should be covered by your insurance. So if you talk to your doctor and you're a male smoker over the age of 65, you should do a little transabdominal ultrasound and check your aorta, see if there's plaque or so forth. And people with diabetes, checking their popliteal arteries, which are the arteries behind their legs. These are important. These are the arteries that get plaque, right? And then if you really want to go hardcore and do some more biohacking, thermography scans, which I love thermography scans, which is heat maps of your body. You guys know, like, heat map, like sometimes you see in the movies. Well, you can do that of your body, because check this out. When a cancer is coming, for example, say a breast cancer, right? What he first needs to do is recruit blood vessels. So that's called angiogenesis. Angio means, the etymology of that word means, it comes for vessels. And then genesis meaning new. So new blood vessels. So the cancer, what he's going to do is recruit blood vessels. When you recruit blood vessels, there's a lot of blood vessels in a spot. It generates heat. So when it generates heat, you see the thermography scan, and you're like, whoa, there's a heat collection there. Same thing, for example, I've done thermography scans. I broke my elbow when I was a kid, so I can't touch my elbow. See, very annoying. And I can't do that with my hand. I can't supinate. I do jujitsu. Maybe I shouldn't have done that on camera, because I kind of keep that a secret in jujitsu. So I shouldn't have said that. But if I did, I shouldn't have said that. But whatever. I always say that in jujitsu. Like, nobody can know about my arm. But anyways, on the heat map that I've done, it actually shows my elbow a little more bluish versus this one. So it's a little colder here. Because of this issue that I have with my arm, right? So thermography scans, I really like them. I think they're wonderful. Anyways, guys, I think this was a mouthful today. I hope you guys took some notes. I hope you guys rewind, take some more notes. Go talk to your docs. Go Google some of the stuff I said. And honestly, do everything. Do you need to? No. But if you want to be proactive and preventative about your health, get the proper information. Get the diagnostics that just might change your life or even save your life. Love y'all. Dr. D.